Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. The best is Sig Sauer. I recommend you too carry the best. And this week, what have I got? I'm pulling out the grab bag here. It's my 45 P220 carry. Highly recommend these weapons. They are amazing. They work, and they work, but most importantly, when you need them to work. So carry Sig Sauer. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out at projectsentinel.com and .net. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, etc., etc. And obviously do a shout out to my friend Cherie Curry, who does our theme and bumper music. I'm wearing her t-shirt today from her Japan tour days. Cherie, love you big. Thank you for all the support to the show. And without further delay, we're bringing in our guest this week. Cheryl Chumley is the online opinion editor and commentary writer and host of The Bold and the Blunt, a great show, I might add, since I was on it. Just saying, if you're going to be on a show, it's a good one. And she's with the Washington Times, a frequent media guest and public speaker. She's the author of several books, the latest title, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom, which is absolutely what happened, and they tried, and I think to continue. And Socialists Don't Sleep. The Christians Must Rise, or America Will Fall. And I think Ronald Reagan, one of my heroes, would agree with you on that. So Cheryl, welcome to The Hard Truth.
It's so great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here and adapting to the circumstance. So we look forward to the conversation. So, man, oh man, we're talking at an interesting time of our history where I've said publicly that we essentially have a form of the high school debating team in charge of our foreign policy at the White House. And no more apparent has been the complete serial failures of policy presented to the American people as it has been over the last few weeks. First off, I'm going to say this, so I don't want to get you in trouble, but I think the Hamas attack was largely I don't want to say underwritten, but I don't know what term to use exactly, but the serial failures of the Biden administration to project a form of collective security for our allies is one of the causal factors of why Hamas struck. And there's been credible reporting saying Hamas and the Iranians started planning this right after the Afghan withdrawal debacle. So that's one point I want us to start off with. Secondly, just the way Biden presents himself, and Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, presents himself. And then Lloyd Austin, and I know Lloyd, General Austin, I served for him in Afghanistan when I was a major and he was the commanding general there. So I know him. The way they present the U.S. policy is feckless. It's without passion, without, dare I say, being convincing. So what do you make of the Joe Biden initial response to the Hamas attack in general?
Well, weak is number one. That's the first word that comes to mind. And I get this image of Joe Biden sitting around the table with some of his cabinet officials, and they're all biting their nails thinking, what do we do? What do we do? But really, their focus is more on image than it is on anything substantial and helpful. And I think that's why you see Joe Biden flying over there, because it's a great photo op moment where he can make a stand and have photos and have the media fawn over him as if he's taking a strong military stand for America and our allies. But really behind the scenes, you get conflicting messages, right? Where does this administration stand on its support of Israel? That's something that's been a concern for a few years now.
Right. So let's break that down a little bit, because to your point, he looked like death warmed over. I mean, the video.
On a good day.
Yeah, I mean, but this was especially terrible. He had that. You remember that movie, Deliverance, the banjo player?
Oh, God.
He had the squinty eyes of the banjo player in Deliverance. And that's not a good thing. I don't think that reassures our allies. But just on stage, he was so detached. Do you believe any of our allies or foes are buying what he's saying at all?
Oh, of course not. I mean, seriously, it's not hard to put yourself in the shoes of governments hostile to America right now and draw the conclusion that if you have designs to do anything aggressive on the world stage, now is the time to do it. And you only have to look at Joe Biden. And I actually think that the planning and plotting for this Hamas attack started way before even Afghanistan. I think Afghanistan was just the final check mark to say, wow, this guy really is as feckless as we believe. So let's go ahead now. It's not a strong image for America. And I just don't think Israel at this moment appreciates Joe Biden stepping into the fray.
So, yeah, I agree with you. And I don't understand why. And as a matter of fact, some wiser Middle Eastern leaders, such as the King of Jordan, said, yeah, don't come here. It's like, thanks, but no. And I think that's the danger is that nature abhors a vacuum. They don't like, it doesn't. And so just the way Biden is acting, he's creating a vacuum. And I want to talk about Vladimir Putin in a bit because underreported here, but very much reported elsewhere, is the fact that Putin's been on the phone with all these world leaders. But let's hold that for a second, because I want to talk about that as part of the changing fabric of the Middle East and how this administration doesn't seem to understand it. And that's where I want to go. Why doesn't Biden or Blinken? Now, Blinken is presented to the world, Cheryl, as this master of all masters of diplomacy. I mean, he's supposed to be like blue-blooded diplomat. I mean, his father is supposed to have been involved in this. I mean, it's just like a family thing. Is Tony Blinken overrated?
Well, I mean, he could be the greatest diplomat ever, but how do you strike a diplomatic deal with people who want to wipe you off the face of the earth?
Good point.
Is the compromise and we'll only wipe half of you off the face of the earth and destroy half of your nation? So this is not a time for diplomacy. And it hasn't been a time for diplomacy for a very long time. Donald Trump saw that. Barack Obama did not.
So Trump actually took action against the Iranians, which I think is unique and was forecast to encourage more attacks, and it had the opposite effect, which was the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And Soleimani, as you know, Cheryl, and I think the audience probably would track this a little bit because I talked about it before. Soleimani was a guy who I actually dealt with in Operation Dark Heart, my first book. We had discovered the enablers of the insurgency against us in eastern Afghanistan, that is on the Pakistani border, were being funded by Iran. They were actually bringing things through Herat, moving it across the country, and paying for the initial insurgency against us in 2003. So, by the way, the administrations, both administrations, didn't dig me talking about that as Bush 43 and Obama. That's one of the reasons they didn't like the book, because we're saying, yeah, the Iranians were early on involved in funding things against us. Soleimani was that. Soleimani did, in effect, help shape and not only train and equip those elements of Iran who were the militias in Iraq fighting against us. He actually provided technology to them that killed Americans. And yet no administration was willing to do anything except Trump. Trump said, hey, enough's enough. I'm going to kill the guy. He killed the guy. And everybody's all upset. It's like, oh my goodness, he killed a terrorist. Yeah, he did. And then the opposite happened from all the foreign policy wonks, which I'd include Tony Blinken and those knuckleheads in that too. Oh, this is going to cause more hate and discontent and more aggression. Like, no, it didn't. Shut it down. Trump seemed to understand making it personal, making those who are engaged in these acts of terror pay a price was the way to go. Why is it Trump figured that out, which many of us figured out and supported him on, and Biden can't figure that out?
You know, this touches on what you and I discussed on my podcast about the question of whether these people are stupid or they're incompetent or there's something deeper going on. And I think you and I both agree that not everybody in the Joe Biden administration is stupid. Not everybody is incompetent. So there's There's something behind the scenes that we in the American public aren't privy to see on a day-to-day basis. We're left to just theorize about it. But I think that is the natural conclusion when you look at the actions of this administration tied to the Barack Obama administration. And there's something deeper going on. And what it's called is tearing down America. And you just have to look at the actions and go past the rhetoric to see that everything that this administration does is aimed at driving America down and crippling our Constitution and elevating players around the world that aren't even friendly to America.
So would you describe this as a form of wokeism? Because wokeism seems to touch everything and destroy it as well. Do you believe that this woke attitude, because part of what you're saying, Cheryl, I think, is reflected in Blinken's complete I don't know how to phrase it, what the correct way of describing it. He's all over the map. Blinken cannot state a clear policy. Yeah. Yes. So is it all about virtue signaling? Is that what they're trying to do here?
Well, I actually see it a little bit deeper than that. I think the wokeness is part of it, right? I think the Barack Obama started the actual destruction of America's military, and it was really pushed through on steroids with this COVID shot under Joe Biden, destroying our military and getting rid of the best and the brightest. And so we have this weakened, woke type of military that goes along with our culture in business and society right now. But I actually see it as a little bit something deeper, because my worldview is Christian conservatism. And I see all that takes place first through the eyes of the battle of evil versus good. And if you look at what this administration does, it certainly benefits the more evil players in the world than it does the good.
So speaking of evil, let's talk about John Kirby.
Yes.
Sorry, John, sorry if you're listening, this offends you, but truth in advertising is a key component to the hard truth, just saying. So anyway, let's go back to John. So John, besides being a snappy dresser and a great connoisseur of cool ties, said in his Transiting the Atlantic about how the policy, because we're talking about the policy objectives, he says something about, zero casualties is our goal. It's like, huh?
Yeah.
What do you think John meant by that?
I don't know. And look, I don't know John Kirby like you do. I've only seen him on news, and he's an interesting guy to me because, yes, he dresses snappy, like you said, but his image, it comes across as so genuine. You almost feel
I've given him credit for that.
You almost feel as if he's the truth teller outside the normal chains of the Joe Biden administration. So it's very deceptive to somebody with discernment, right? But you listen to what he says, and on one hand, he tells the people on the plane that he's flying over there with that they're going to insist on an upholding of international law and so forth when it talks about engaging military forces. And then at the same time, though, he says, but they also insist on zero civilian casualties in the Gaza. And I don't understand how you can do that. That's not what Hamas did when they attacked Israel.
So let's hit that point, because we're crossing policy with a little bit of media right now. But I do want to circle back to the Biden and Blinken issues in a second. Much of what John says plays into this other narrative that I've seen in the global media saying, the Israelis must restrain themselves. It's like I'm sitting there listening to this, like, yeah, but Hamas didn't really restrain themselves. I mean, there's credible videos of kidnappings, of murders. I feel terrible about that poor German girl who was in the back of that truck naked, being driven around. It's like, did they show restraint? I mean, I'm just asking because, I don't see restraint on Hamas yet. Somehow now, a week later, a little over a week later, no. We must be restrained. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get in trouble for it, but I'm going to say it anyway. For better or for worse, the people of the Gaza Strip elected Hamas to be their political representations. Isn't that correct? I mean, 2007. Am I getting history correct here?
I think there's 52% support that the Washington Institute just found just a few weeks ago for those in Gaza for Hamas. So it's the majority.
So there you go. So I don't know. I'm trying to circle that square, and I can't do it because when Kirby says things like, "Oh, you know, they need to strike," didn't I just see these credible videos of Hamas? And don't I recall that they've actually got prisoners to include ours, American prisoners, and so I can't believe that we're seeing such a downplaying of the facts in favor of Hamas. So I consider John Kirby's comments to be essentially anti-Israeli. Am I going too far by saying that?
It reminds me of Jane Fonda, right? Sitting atop the communist tank or whatever, and then pretending like just trying to get along with everybody. Look, the Hamas and all terror groups in general are experts at propaganda, right? And this is what we're seeing right now, the turning in the media. First, we had the horror over the attack that Hamas terrorists did against Israel. But now we're seeing the tide turn, and the media is sort of focusing on the children and the women and the hospital that was just blown up in Gaza and so forth, and putting it forth as if Israel has just crossed boundaries by killing all these people, when at the same time, the hospital that I just referenced, it was actually a wayward rocket from the terrorists, right?
I want to go through that, yeah.
Yes, but you don't get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez making that distinction. And this is the dangerous part, Tony, right? This is where the world shifts and turns against Israel.
So, yeah, so I want to hit that because Kirby seems to already be feeding the narrative, oh, you know, we've got to pull back the Israelis.
Yes. Yep.
And to your point, I was confronted several times today on interviews on this point. It's like, well, who do you think did it? I think the Islamic Jihad did it. One of the groups within the area that's not necessarily controlled by Hamas, but they're a sister organization. And I'm just saying, like, I look at the timestamps. So basically, nobody disagrees when the bomb hit. The bomb hit when it hit. The question becomes, was it derived from the West, from a bomb? I've seen reports as, oh, it's this type bomb derived, made by us. Like, I don't think so. There's no indicators that that's what it is. But there are indicators that they were firing off a cluster of these unguided munitions towards the Israelis, and on the path of that flight is the hospital. So to me, it's ample. Plus, you have the Israelis releasing audio, which is very sensitive, about Hamas talking about, hey, we kind of did it. I find that very credible. I find that at least as credible that there's some Hamas knucklehead, more credible than some Hamas knucklehead said, no, it was the West. It's not the West. And I just get tired when the U.S. media won't pick up and actually tell the truth. If the Israelis did it, I'd be critical. It's like, that wasn't a legitimate target of war. That's something they should rethink. But they didn't do it. They didn't. As a matter of fact, I think they are indeed trying to avoid casualties of civilian targets like that. But what are we to make of our own media and John Kirby reinforcing that, basically taking sides against the truth?
Well, we're to be extremely critical of the media, and I'm going to sidestep a little bit on what you said, that you might be critical if Israel did actually hit this hospital. I think the bigger question here is not who hit the hospital, but it really doesn't matter because Israel is at war. And look, Hamas is the one that started this. Why does Israel have to be the one to back off and take the casualties and suck it up, which only would embolden further terrorism against Israel down the line, with an America just doing the diplomatic dance again? If Israel ended up being the one who hit this hospital and women and children are dead, that's on Hamas. That's on the terrorists. And I think that's the narrative that we really need to keep focusing on.
Well, it is their fault, no matter how you cut it, because they elected Hamas. They've created conditions for this. One of the other things that I want to talk about briefly before we get back to Blinken, because this does relate to Blinken's recent diplomatic. No, there's a method to my madness. Trust me on this. So speaking of Hamas, the United Nations has spent millions, if not billions, on trying to help both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to basically become an economically self-sufficient and viable society. They've tried their best to give them civil projects to have water, and they've taken those projects and dug the pipes out of the ground and turned them into missiles. Not a good thing. They've taken all these other resources they've given them, instead of developing that into a viable economic a series of opportunities for the people. They've basically built tunnels. They've taken all the technology they could have built roads and businesses with and said, we're just going to build tunnels and do things to basically attack the Israelis. I believe, I don't expect you to comment on this, but I do believe that the Oslo II Accord of 95 created conditions for a two-state solution. And let me give you my thinking on this. When that was signed on the White House lawn, nobody was for a two-state solution. But within the context of Oslo II, you had the establishment of these zones where the Palestinians were going to be kind of left to their own devices. Let me say this in a way that I think the audience would understand. I believe had the Palestinians worked their behinds off to establish an economic success story where basically they focus on trying to build up and promote their own people and their own interests as a society, they would be a two-state solution. Instead, what they did is they took those resources and just started attacking the Israelis. I think there would have been a natural commingling of the Israelis and Palestinians if both were seeking peace. I sincerely believe the Israelis are seeking peace. I do not believe Hamas is seeking peace. So that's the conditions I think we're faced with right now, is that you've had a state, you've had a territory with the Gaza Strip and Hamas, who have basically said one of their tenant foundational principles is we need to destroy the Israelis. So I don't see how you can circle that square, Cheryl. Is if you got a territory that says they're going to kill you, I don't see how you're supposed to do that. And the UN has only poured fuel onto that fire, and then we have too, because there's been funding that we fought against back during the Obama years, where we thought that funding was being diverted from the Palestinian Authority to Hamas and other terrorist groups. So why is it that our side doesn't understand this? Because I don't think these things I just said are hard to understand.
No, they're not hard to understand. There's a willfulness that goes along with the reluctance to understand. And so, look, I was just in Israel. I was there in December, January, and there are Muslims who walk all around Jerusalem. They're allowed to go anywhere. There are no prohibitions on where Arabs, on where Palestinian people can go. They can travel freely, but Jews can't go into Gaza, right? They haven't been in Gaza since I think it was 2006. And so there's a definite division there about who wants peace versus who does not want peace. And we talked briefly on the 52% of Palestinians who voted for Hamas, but that doesn't even get into the 85% or so who support groups like Lion's Den, and there's another terrorist organization, PLN, I think is the name. That Palestinians, by and large, support terror groups in some respect. Maybe not all Hamas, but there are other ones that they support just as equally.
So that brings me back to Tony Blinken. And isn't he a great rock and roller? I don't know why he didn't join the Rolling Stones.
Good voice, voice, right?
Yeah. Did you know that in college he was in a band and his nickname was Spanky Banana? Did you know that?
Oh, no. Maybe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez danced to him at one point.
Well, right? I could only imagine what kind of a Spanky Banana that would have been, just saying. So anyway, back to the serious topics of Tony Blinken. So everything you've just outlined, I think, summarizes where we're at relating to Blinken's failed diplomacy, shuttle diplomacy, because Tony Blinken went forward ahead of Biden's visit, and he visited with President al-Sisi, who, by the way, is a War College graduate, great guy, President of Egypt, the King of Jordan, who we've had really great relationships with. We've got bases in Jordan, which we kind of acknowledge but don't. And then he went and talked to the Saudis. And across the board, he was rejected. First off, he started with al-Sisi. And by the way, people can go look this up because the State Department put the readout of these meetings on their site. So I'm not talking about anything that cannot be verified directly, independently. Al-Sisi chewed him out. Basically, it's like, no, we're not taking the refugees. Sorry. And I think there's a couple different reasons for that. First off, Egypt is now on a path of actually kind of stabilizing. Al-Sisi came in after took over from the Muslim Brotherhood, and they've been on a path of recovery. And plus, we screwed things up when we destabilized Libya. Trust me, I've talked to the Egyptian chief of intelligence about that. So al-Sisi's been working his butt off to stabilize his country and make it better for his people. The last thing they want, Cheryl, is a bunch of knuckleheads coming in from the Gaza Strip who are going to start basically drawing attention and being terrorists. So I can see why he said no. Same with Jordan. It's like, we don't want these folks. The Arab world is serially rejected any movement of the Palestinians into their territories, and Blinken failed. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I think we should continue to reject them too. Our borders
I think so.
Are already porous, and we have that little problem with those tens of thousands of Chinese communists who were just discovered crossing the border, along with Middle Eastern men between the ages of 18 and 25. So add to that Palestinian refugees, who knows what we'll have in this country. So, I understand the surrounding nations not wanting to take the people, and which is another consideration why Hamas should not have attacked Israel. And for America to put pressure on our allies and other nation governments to take these people, it really doesn't advance discussions, and it certainly isn't very diplomatic.
Well, speaking of that, now we'll continue this on part 2 with our extended team. During the time that the Biden administration has been fecklessly working to do whatever they're doing, a lack of policy resolve or focus, Putin's been making the rounds, calling everybody. So we'll talk about that in part 2 of the show. Anyway, we're going to take a break right now. This is Tony Shaffer, Hard Truth, powered by 6 Hour. We'll be back with part 2 after this short break. Okay, this is the Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, part 2, powered by 6 Hour. Never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I do recommend you carry the best now, just like I do. Carry 6 Hour. Never settle. We're on America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and on their podcast network. Check them out. Check us out. We are Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com and projectsentinel.net. And, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and all the other sites that you can think of. So we're continuing our discussion today with Cheryl Chumley from the Bold and Blunt podcast of the Washington Times. She's been a good sport putting up with my snarkiness, and it only gets thicker here, Cheryl, just saying. So we're going to roll into part 2, and we're joined by the statistically significant Elizabeth Breckenkamp and the ever cordial and corny Chris Cordani. So here we go.
I'll go with that. The corn nut.
And here we go. Deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra once said. All right, so we're going to continue our discussion. So, Cheryl, we just wrapped up, and I was just kind of going through the Blinken winking and nod failure of diplomacy of the Biden White House. I mean, it's just been atrocious. And I'm not just kidding. Joe Biden looks so. I can't believe they put him out on stage looking as bad as he did. I think he did more damage on stage with Netanyahu than they fully understand. And no amount of snazzy John Kirby speaking all glib with his $500 Georgetown ties is going to make up for that. But let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is Vladimir Putin. I always have to say this because I get in trouble otherwise. I do a lot of media just like you do. I do WMAL, and I'm doing Newsmax later today as part of my normal routine. I'm not pro-Putin, but Putin is in a position right now to look like the strong horse. He's actually done telephonic diplomacy. So while Blinken was doing all this failure, Putin was on the phone with President al-Sisi, the King of Jordan, with the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and Netanyahu. He's spoken to all these people, Cheryl. So what do you make of Putin jumping into the game right now?
He did that under Barack Obama, too. If you remember in Syria, where he jumped in and Barack Obama kept drawing the red line, la-di-da, and Putin jumped in. Right. And he was able to take over the world stage and emerge as a strong figure, while Barack Obama was wearing sandals and eating ice cream cones on Nantucket or whatever. So for Putin for Putin
What's
to
the thing with ice cream?
I don't know.
Biden ice cream about, sorry.
Yeah, I guess it runs with the Democrats, right?
The Biden ice cream thing.
Ice cream, yeah.
Well, the Biden ice cream thing, don't you just, aren't you supposed to give ice cream to, let's say, seniors who are kind of suffering from memory problems or
calms them.
To calm them down.
That's right.
So they don't say anything stupid.
I understand his favorite actual flavor is dill pickle. Just saying. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that. So.
Oh, gosh.
Might have been Obama's favorite.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't know these things. Anyway, well, back on the topic, though. So, but, and Cheryl, to your point, last time I checked, now the Russians have permanent bases in Syria, right? Am I right about that?
I believe so. I mean, I know that Russia has arms agreements with Iran, which should be a concern right now.
Should.
And like you said, with him on the phone with everybody, it just seems like Joe Biden is the weak kid being pushed in the corner, and here comes Putin again with Russia. Yes. To be the strong, bold leader. Yeah.
So how is the American media missing this? Because to me, we're just talking here. We're just having a conversation, looking through the fact. How is it the American media isn't picking up on this?
They don't care.
It's not part of the narrative. Keep in mind, they're siding with Nazis and telling them to hide their uniform, their Nazi logos when fighting against Russia. There's and of course now many of them are trying as hard as they can to report this without through their teeth, apparently, just like the old Monica Lewinsky stories. They report them like they're reluctantly reporting what's going on.
Your pain, Chris.
Right. And now there's report. And they were jumping on this whole thing with Gaza. And now, as we're taping on the Wednesday, we're hearing reports out. Oh, it's not, the hospital didn't explode, didn't blow up. We're not even sure who actually did it, but now the fire seemed to have been in a parking lot.
Oh, please.
Yeah. So again, these are reports. Nothing is definitive, but this is what's happening.
So, but Cheryl, you're a member of the media, and technically I am too, although I try not to be.
Mainstream.
It's very clear that. Yes. Well, no, I mean, it's like, but I've seen your work. We've had discussions. I think we're obligated as members of the media in some form to actually kind of use facts and tell the truth. Am I missing something here? Because it seems to me the rest of the media ignores that.
But the rest of the media just runs around and goes for the clicks and the racy headlines for the most part, right? Those are the ones that aren't like the deep state plants. And but by and large, though, journalists these days, to me, the big problem is they report absent context, right? Yeah. So they'll report on this bombing or that bombing, but they won't slide in the story somewhere about some sort of context where you as a reader can draw the conclusion, oh, this was retaliation versus aggression, which is key points when you're covering wars.
So last night I did prep for this because I knew I was going to be talking about this very topic all day. I educated myself in an hour on the issues of Putin and Biden. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to do. And when people are paid to be professionals, I think dare I say they should be professionals. I mean, I'm not being upset with you. I mean, you're great. I'm just saying that there are clearly members of the media, Washington Post, New York Times, who essentially have basically abandoned all interest in factual reporting. And essentially, to your point, they're emotional, they focus on a narrative, and essentially they are the lapdogs of whoever you want to. It's not even the right or left anymore. I don't even consider, because I know I'm friends with Tulsi Gabbard. I love Tulsi. So, I mean, you know what I mean. And she left that party because of the very thing that we're talking about here, a complete reluctance to actually accept facts, objective facts, as the coin of the realm. And I think it's a dangerous thing, because now where we're at is actually putting us on a path of war. I've spoken to people this morning, some of who I rarely have contact with, saying, Colonel, is it as bad as we think, as it looks? And my answer is, yeah, it kind of is now. What do you think, Cheryl? I mean,
well, I'm looking at Russia and how Russia historically operates, right? They're long game, they're deceptive, and so forth. And I'm looking at our aircraft destroyer that we put in the area, the Gerald Ford carrier, which is one of the best ships in the world, right?
It is.
And I'm wondering if perhaps Russia has some sort of end game of drawing us into this engagement to weaken us further on the world stage and weaken us militarily to open us up to some sort of attack against America or surge across the border where we get more plants of hostile players in America. I'm looking at Israel and Hamas as one war, but I'm also trying to look beyond that and what Russia is doing with the sneaky Putin in charge, who never, I think, renounced his KGB roots. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And wondering what they have in store for America with our open borders.
So it's not even just that. I want to throw in something else.
Sure.
I know I jumped in on you, Tony, there.
That's okay.
But it's a long game with Putin. He's playing with the Middle East situation, trying to make us look weak and bad. But he's also doing this on the economic front, where the BRICS nation, and we cannot stop paying attention to this. The BRICS nations are trying to supplant the dollar, and the R in BRICS is obviously Russia. And the C, of course, is China. They're trying to do their best to take us down at any way possible. Now, apparently, we're doing that too, but that's a different story for a different day.
So let's break that a little bit. So Cheryl, on that point, I've said multiple times, you can take the man out of the Soviet Union, you can't take the Soviet Union out of the man, and that's Putin. Putin is Putin, and it's so funny in the old days when Barack Obama told Mitt Romney, "Oh, the '80s want their nationalists." Like, no, you fundamentally don't understand it. So speaking of that, so we've had leaders who were smart enough to not get us involved in a large ground war in Syria. I know H.R. McMaster walked in twice to talk to Trump about, we need to put 500,000 troops into Syria. It's like, no. As a matter of fact, my friend and former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, said, I don't want us in Syria because we put people in Syria, they're going to be looking for things to do, and it's going to get out of control. So God bless the fact that Trump and others said that's a tar baby we don't want to get in the middle of. That's something we don't want. With that said, I don't think the Biden administration is smart enough to figure it out. It's like, they're not trying to actually encourage you to do the right thing for the region. They're trying to get you bogged down so that they can do things elsewhere globally. Do you think that's an accurate assessment of what Putin's trying to do?
Oh, I definitely do. Yeah, I mean, it's common sense, right? You don't even have to have a degree in international studies or anything like that. If you want to put yourself in the minds of an enemy, it's simple. Now's the time to strike under Joe Biden, and how you do it is to weaken our military, to distract us from insurgencies into our border, insurgencies into America, and then strike before Joe Biden is out of office. And I just think that you can't look at the border crossings we've had, historic levels of men ages like 18 to 25 from China and from the Middle East, massive crossings into our border. I don't think you can look at that separate from what Putin's designs are ultimately, as well as what's going on in Israel with Hamas. I just see it all being played together and exploited by some people who in governments who are much more clever than Joe Biden, which is to say pretty much anybody and everyone.
Except for Fetterman.
Except for Fetterman, yes.
And maybe that Cortez lady, but that's a different story for a different time.
She's a blank slate, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being a blank slate is not all bad. I mean, most of Hollywood's a blank slate, just saying. So
yeah. Just like a sponge, they'll absorb anything people tell them, and they don't think about it.
So, Elizabeth, any questions? Anything you want to get into?
Oh, well, I know you're talking a lot about Putin, but I was just trying to follow along, with Biden's trip to Israel, and kind of like going online, trying to see, his itinerary, his daily itinerary, which, anybody can look up. And it just shows like maybe not even an hour ago, Biden is in Tel Aviv. Well, he was, and he was cautioning the Israelis not to be consumed by rage, which, I understand. You don't want to, you have to think rationally, but he also said the vast majority of the Palestinians are not affiliated with Hamas. I think that's interesting.
It is.
That he wanted to say that, like he's trying to make it sound like, Hamas is not who you think it is. It's like, what do you think about that?
Well, Elizabeth, one of the things I think, maybe Cheryl will back me up on this, we invaded a whole country over 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, we went into Afghanistan. We were pretty upset. I was there for that. And I think it's a bit of hypocrisy, if you ask me. Cheryl, what do you think? I mean,
Biden is nothing but a hypocrite, but yeah.
What do I think? I think if I'm a family member of one of the American hostages who are being held by terrorist Hamas right now, that I'm preparing for a burial. I'm preparing for the worst announcement, because when he makes statements like that, all he is doing is giving a go-ahead chant to the terrorist groups who are just exploiting the situation now.
Mm-hmm.
So to carry on Elizabeth's question regarding the perception. So Lloyd Austin said within the last 24 hours that he's not worried, that we have the ability to take on two separate fronts and support those. Do you believe that, Cheryl?
Lloyd Austin, the same guy that told us our Afghanistan withdrawal was a success?
That's Lloyd Austin.
I do not believe that.
That guy. Yeah, that guy.
That guy.
That's the guy.
No. No.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah.
He's no Steve Austin. That's what I'll tell you.
Yeah. So, so Elizabeth's point, I think, is well taken. And they're just speaking out of both sides of their mouth. And I don't think it's actually creating conditions for us to be successful, because to your point, Cheryl, we still have Americans in harm's way. And the fact that the Biden administration, and before that, the Obama administration, negotiated with terrorists, I think it's just emboldened those to take prisoners and hold people ransom. I think it's going to get worse. And I think John Kirby even admitted that they're now negotiating with Hamas over this. So I don't see how that's healthy, that we're negotiating with Hamas over getting our prisoners back. Not that I'm saying we should do nothing. I just don't know if that's going to net us anything. So, I know it's a pretty harsh thing to say.
I agree with you, right? And this is the problem with having a president who does not understand foreign policy, because you can't come into the White House office and expect to just react to things as they happen. You have to start early and send out a narrative that you're a strong leader, right? That's what Ronald Reagan did. That's why day one, the hostages were released with Ronald Reagan, because he started early. And so if you keep that up, like Donald Trump did too, you never knew where Donald Trump stood on drawing a line of using military might versus diplomacy, name calling versus taking strong action. That's what you need to do. But Democrats don't get that. And I don't know if it's they don't want to get that for some deeper reason, or they just don't have the mental competency to grasp that.
So on that point, before we start into the Tony's takes, we're doing that next year in a second. But one of my friends and mentors was Bud McFarland. God rest his soul. Bud was an amazing man. So Bud would often instruct me on how Reagan did things. And he told me a couple of stories how Reagan, like, for example, the Reykjavik meeting between he and Gorbachev. Reagan would insist that Bud put together a full targeting package, if you will, on whoever he's going up to negotiate against. Reagan played the man. Reagan understood the dynamics of personal relationships, and he wasn't below or above bluffing in a way to make people do things or think things. And Reagan was always playing that game. He was always out there pushing the envelope. I think the only thing Joe Biden could probably push right now is a walker, and probably not well. So
even that he needs help, right? That's why his wife's always next to him.
2 words for you, Woodrow Wilson. Okay, that's it. Same thing with the vice president.
A doctor. Yeah.
Doctor.
Right.
Oh, ouch. Well, sort of.
She's a doctor of dental proctology. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I'm sure she carries around an IV bag with her everywhere she goes. And
she carries around a bag of something.
I think Dr. Johnny Fever has more of a medical degree.
That's a flashback.
That was a funny show.
And turkeys can't fly. So
we do have one. And that is one of Tony's takes, by the way.
Oh, it is.
Thanksgiving take for Tony. Ooh. However, do want to ask these questions because Tony's takes is powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle.
Never settle.
That's right. Settle. By the way, you can find a little more about Sig Sauer on our website, thehardtruthwithtony.com. That's right. The premiere of the new website, thehardtruthwithtony.com, coming soon. So,
we've been coordinating that with our allies, haven't we? We have.
Oh, we might even have TonyShaffer.com coming soon. There we go.
Might. I know that guy. I've met him.
There we go. Let's get your takes on this one, though. You've heard this one. After a load of Harvard students signed a petition in full support of Hamas and its rampage attack against the Israeli citizens, now I'm going to note this, primarily women and children and teens, it's a virtue signal. When it becomes public, several Wall Street businesses decided that, hey, we're not going to hire these idiots. Now, these kids are, and assorted wokies around them are crying foul over it. Effectively, those who reveled in the idea of canceling those who disagree with them are taking this their own bitter medicine. What say you, Tony?
So I like the way you described them as a load of students, because there's a lot of load there, just saying.
Definitely.
And I think maybe the people who are going to hire them recognized a load when they saw it. And it has to do with what you smell when you go by a big old slaughterhouse in Texas.
Well, some of these kids are saying, "Oh, I didn't read what was on it." Well, that's great. I wouldn't hire you for that reason either.
I know who would hire them: Bud Light, and they'd say, "We need you in our marketing. We need new marketing people for Bud Light because you're so in touch with your feelings." Yeah,
I feel your pain. I feel your pain, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
But even if they didn't,
I don't want you.
Even if they didn't stand like that and weren't reading, I wouldn't hire them either, because they don't even pay attention to what they're signing. They're more.
Cheryl, would you all hire those folks at the Washington Times?
Oh gosh, no. Maybe to clean my toilets. Maybe.
Would you want them producing your show, Cheryl? All right, not happening.
No.
It's so funny when they're faced with their own hypocrisy. They just can't handle it. It's like they just break down.
No, they cancel. They would cancel conservatives if this was reversed. So yeah, I'm glad to see them taking their own medicine.
They would cancel conservatives if we only brushed our teeth with red toothbrushes, because that symbolized that you wouldn't want to touch a blue one. But anyway, but what say you again, Tony? Another take from you about this. Hey,
all right.
The good thing about this is people like them, the squadlings and others, these woke professors, are showing their true colors instead of hiding behind the little walls.
Is that a take?
Yeah, it's always a take.
So, well, no, I mean, my take is I enjoy the comedy of Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, this has given me comedy gold. I mean, look at all the people who are speaking out and saying stupid things that we now can make fun of. John Kirby and his snappy ties, Ocasio-Cortez and her dance moves that were done at the Boston University. By the way, does she have a master in dance? Is that why she came to fame?
I think she had a minor in dance.
I will say props to her on the Breakfast Club thing. A lot of these kids don't even know what the Breakfast Club is. I'll give one to her. That's her 1 point. After that, downhill.
So, Cheryl, this is a good question, though, to you. So we have a number of members of Congress who clearly are siding with terrorists. I mean, they've openly said it. What do you think should be the remedy regarding if Jim Jordan wins? I love Jim. Jim and I are friends. I love Jim. I hope he does win. Should there be something done by Jim against these members of Congress who have clearly spoken out and undermined the free world's interest in holding terrorists accountable? Any thoughts on that?
I think they should be stripped of any committee assignments that has dealings with foreign affairs and overseas interests and so forth, and start with that. I mean, you have to take a strong stand and shut down this anti-Semitic talk. Otherwise, it festers and grows.
Well, you're right. That's a good point.
Give them the Swalwell treatment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like the last time I checked, that World War II was bad. The Holocaust was bad. We recognize the right of the Israelis to exist. Oh, by the way, the UN created Israel, right? 1948, as I recall. So how is it then we can have these people who literally, essentially, they're putting forth, that is the squad, and let me be very clear on this so I don't get in trouble, they are putting forth essentially not Nazi ideology by what they're saying. I don't know how they can get away with that.
Yeah,
because they can.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think they can. People aren't taught history any longer, and youthful generations are taught to hate America and blame America, and by logical extension, blame Israel for what ails the world. So I think it's what Chris just said, because they can.
Right. All right, Tony, Cheryl, Elizabeth, let's get your take on this one. John Fetterman appears on Stephen Colbert's show. No, I'm not going to pronounce it the way he wants to pronounce it. Anyway, he goes,
he's not French.
I'm paraphrasing it, but he goes, the best and brightest are not being sent to Congress. I loosely translate that as into English. Hello, Pot. My name is Kettle.
Yeah, I saw that. And I thought it was fake at first. It's like,
that's
really?
so funny.
It's like Joe Biden espousing the need to protect children from taking showers with their dads.
No,
Just saying. Just saying.
You got to give him points for just, being bold enough to say that statement, because everybody in the world is thinking like you, John.
Yeah.
He's bold enough for dressing up like the gym teacher on the Goldbergs. And I think both of them, the first one and the second one.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's interesting?
Coach
I hate
Rick
to say
and
this.
Coach Nick. Yeah.
I hate to say this, but some people, you just look at them and you wonder about what their grooming habits really are and what it's like to be in a room with them. I mean, I just wonder if how often he washes that stuff, or something he just kind of throws on at random and hopes for the best that day. So
I'm amazed he's married.
Oh, I'm not. She's a committed Marxist. Have you seen her? It's like she's the female Che Guevara, for goodness sake. And she's just missing the beard.
Need to physically share a room with him. Oh, well.
This is bad.
Sorry.
And a note on Stephen Colbert. I'll tell you what, it's funny. All these late night lefties. What happened to late night comedy? It's been terrible. And what really bothers me about Stephen Colbert is nobody really care. And a lot of these far left people seem to look at this guy and say, "Wow, he has glasses. That means he's smarter than me." Like they look at Joe Biden and say, "Wow, he wears sunglasses. That means he's cool."
And he whispers. He whispers when he's when he talks. That means he's smart.
Don't say that, Cheryl. Don't say that.
Not creepy at all.
Yes, Seth Meyers isn't funny. I think Jimmy Fallon's kind of funny, but
funny looking.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Kimmel hasn't been funny since win Ben Stein's money.
I think Toe Fungus is funnier than Jimmy Kimmel. Just saying.
Oh, Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel's not funny.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon's kind of funny sometimes, but anyway.
Fallon.
He's only as funny as his writers, which is funny because my daughter-in-law is a writer for The Tonight Show.
I love. I still steal, and Chris knows this because I've admitted to it. I steal Johnny Carson jokes to this day. Johnny Carson was just funny. Period.
He was.
He won at both sides, and I just miss Johnny. I miss the apolitical. Let's just make fun of everybody and have a good time, because it just is not like that anymore. And I'm going to go on record. I'm predicting the demise of late night TV. They're just going to get rid of these guys because they're too expensive and they're not funny. So,
well, that's like saying the Earth's going to spin tomorrow too.
That's right.
It's going to happen.
Chris, have you thought about getting your own talk show?
I do have one, but it's not very good. So
it is good. No. It is good. It's called the White House Lounge, and we have some great discussions. As a matter of fact, we're coming up. My friend Bob Hayes has agreed to join us. Right, my friend Bob, who sent happy birthday to me.
We're doing another one with Taco again, by the way.
Yeah. I think it's very entertaining. I like it.
Yeah. So we're going to have Bob Hayes and my friend Doomcock, the future ruler of Earth, on, and we're going to be talking about all sorts of movies that could not be made today, right? Which is a lot.
We'll be doing that. We're doing some horror. We're doing horror movies and stuff like that with Taco, and we have a couple more down the road too.
So I got to do this because Bob called me on my birthday. Sure, I don't know if you know Bob Hayes from Airplane and I are close friends. So Bob calls me on my birthday, and he's trying to explain to me Shatner and lingerie. And I thought he was serious, so I ruined the joke. It's like, and I said, "Well, I know Bill Shatner. You know Bill Shatner. What are you talking about? This? You ruined my joke." So I owe it to get him on a show that we can make up for me not allowing him to be funny. Just saying.
Genius.
So, and
he let him tell us jokes.
That's right. So we are here at the end of another stellar episode of The Hard Truth of Tony Shaffer. And so, Cheryl, thank you for joining us and putting up with our shenanigans here at the end. We always like to have things a little bit lighter than usual.
Yes. And
still put out solid foreign policy and national security information to our audience. And so that's what they tune in for. So anyway, thank you, everybody, for tuning in to us. Thank you, Elizabeth, Chris, and again, Cheryl, for being here today. We will be back again next week with another episode of The Hard Truth. Be sure and check out Sig Sauer, Never Settle, and check out Cherie Curry, who does our bumper music and theme. Always out doing great stuff, and we'll see you again real soon. Thanks for joining us.